Hey, welcome back to Saturday Morning Sages, where your sages are here to tell you what Saturday mornings are about. No, we're actually here to talk about Star Trek Lower Decks, the season one, the season finale, and all that other stuff. So we just got done, watching that episode, the last couple episodes in the season.
And
Thought
rewatching in some cases.
and rewatching it, yeah, for me it's definitely a rewatch, but and worth it. So spoilers, by the way. So here's your spoiler warning. Outside of that, you get no more after this point. But all right, everybody, um, just let me know what did you guys think of it. I mean, we've been watching this whole thing together. What you
What a
thought?
what a ride! But go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I thought it wrapped up really well. Wrapped up much in the same way that it began. It's basically just like a good comedy skewed take on Trek in general. I mean, it's like a lot of these stories could definitely work as actual proper episodes of a Star Trek show. But it's like they just happen to be skewed more towards like the more ridiculous and it's like and zanier sides of this of the like of the franchise. Like the episode 9 was this big old parody of like the movie style that you see in Trek movies, like from the J.J. Abrams stuff to all the way to the old school stuff, like with the original series crew. It's like and then even some bits with the next gen as well. It's like it was. And like I say, it's a lot. It's a lot of jokes here, but it's also like a story about it's like about a mariner. It's just like wanting to go through having to go through therapy after she liberates like a world of lizard people from their rat people overlords. And it turns out that Boimler has made this like ultra realistic simulation of the crew to help him advance his like his rank in like for an upcoming interview. And well, Mariner just turns it into like a big old parody of the movies where she's in the con role. It's like, and she's got some aggression to work out towards her mother. So it was a great little episode right there, especially with the wrap up when turns out that that even though it's like all the like all the regular crew was here, it's like there are also still versions of all of them. It's like in this some simulation, and then the final episode. Well, lots and lots of callbacks to the to the next gen, but ultimately I kind of felt they were all earned because like it hinges on the reappearance of a new and far more deadly alien race that the Cerritos has to match wits with, and it's gonna and well, it's like it basically calls upon like Mariner to just like use all of her like evil. It's like or like her out of the box thinking to get through this. Like with like she has to show them where all the contraband is in. They've got to break out all the weapons in order to like show these guys who's boss, and also got to find a way to like get these guys off their backs, which may or may not involve the return of a certain holographic badge. But
Well, spoilers are already implied, so you can go
sure.
on ahead and say it. So the enemy here are the Packlids. Yeah. So the last time that the Packlids were seen were in the Star
Was it
Trek
the
The
only
Next
time?
Generation. Yeah. By the way, just some trivia on that. There's a guy who played a Klingon and he played a Packlid. His name was Chris Latta. He is the original voice of Cobra Commander and Starscream.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but he passed away a long time ago. But he played a Packlid. That was the one where they kidnapped Geordi, and they're
Dude's got
like,
range.
yeah. So, but yeah, just I think that to me is kind of a cool fact, being a Transformers and GI Joe fan. So,
And Star
just thought
Trek.
I'd throw that out. And Star Trek. Yep, all
Yeah.
three in there.
Destro.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So, but yeah, so moving on to Myron, your thoughts on all of this and season wrap up and all that.
Again, this was a very fun ride, and I felt that the final two episodes were very strong. Like, to Jason's point too, touching on this episode's story about Boimler's program being repurposed to be a movie, and this ended up being Mariner's like therapy treatment. I loved a lot of the touches that they exhibited in this episode with the lens flares to, you know, touch on Abrams' like shooting style, the film grain, the lower 360, the multi-angle 360 shots when you first see
the spaceship porn.
Yeah, the Cerritos, the spaceship porn. And so like those little touches kind of like, you know, really hit me as like a movie fan. But of course, like the spaceship porn had me rolling because it's like, yeah, any sci-fi movie, especially any historic sci-fi movie, like you're touching on the Enterprise, or in science fantasy, you're touching on the Millennium Falcon. You're always going to have those over glorious kind of like shots, and I love how they kind of played on that.
Those, by the way, the stretch shots, just as a point of reference, in Spaceballs, they took that to an extrme joke.
Yeah,
you remember like the Spaceball ship? It's like and you're just like following like the hull of the ship, and you're like, is it gonna end?
Yeah, dude, it felt like a 5-minute sequence. Like, damn, dude, this is a long ass ship. So,
and you think it's gonna be done, and there's more ship,
and then the kicker at the end.
And of course, we all grew up kind of like watching those kind of like ship introductions and glorification within like Star Wars, Star Trek, you know, Battlestar, whatever, you know, science fiction, science fantasy franchise we love. But when it's over exaggerated like that, you know, like you just can't help but laugh and chuckle because you just kind of know like, oh man, they're totally making fun of like, you know, those introductions we know and love. But yeah, some movies take it to the extreme to where it's like, yeah, it's really drawn out. But I love how they they kind of like exploited that and showed that in this episode. And it was really interesting to me because it didn't really hit me that Mariner and the captain's like relationship was a secret. Like, I mean, we were introduced earlier on in this season that, yeah, they're mother and daughter, but you know, I guess I never really took a mental note. I just kind of assumed that, you know, or at least her friends like Boimler and Beckett and Tendi knew that, you know, they were related. But at the same time, when I really thought about it, I was like, you know what? It was never really mentioned or alluded. You know, they just bumped heads, and you just knew that they didn't get along. At least to us as the audience, like even before it was known, you can tell like, oh, they got to be mother and daughter because the way they bicker is just too emotional. And so like it was really surprising for me, especially in the final episode where like Boimler spills the beans that by accident that Beckett is actually the daughter of the captain. Everybody was like surprised and shocked, and I'm like, oh, I at least would have thought or assumed the senior officers would have known, but that just added a little bit more of a dynamic, you know, to their relationship as a whole throughout this whole season. Because now that the secret was out, I noticed in the last episode, it seemed like they were free and free Captain Freeman, or, you know, Beckett's mother, you know, she kind of opened up a little bit and let her do her, you know, like to Jason's point earlier, like her, like, you know, using contraband and illegal weapons and drugs or whatever means necessary to get something done. In this final episode, we finally see like Beckett's leadership skills really be put to the really be put on display. And of course, like, you know, Beckett throughout the whole season, she mentioned, you know, she alludes quite a bit, like, you know, Mom, you don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've done. You don't know my experience, things like that. And I feel like, you know, her mother finally was kind of forced to, you know, put her in a position of responsibility, and she really showed improved. So I loved how like that all came to a culmination at the very end of the season to really showcase like how dope she is in front of like everybody, like all the senior officers and even to her mother herself, So I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Yep. Yeah, and I have the same thoughts. And by the way, that was something that's come across several times in this show is like Mariner's true abilities versus, what she's actually, so when it's crunch time, she's like, okay, time to, stop, screwing around. Let's get the job done. This was kind of evident when her friend, who was who became a captain, they both went to the academy together, and she's, when they were in trouble, when they were on the Rubido the USS Rubido trying to save their crew, she's like, where's this Mariner been this whole time? Like, but yeah, it's kind of a good contrast. I like it.
And you know what? Like I really can't attest to this. Maybe my friends, if they listen, are kind of like this. But there are certain people or certain employees who are like that. Where, and I'm not sure if you had those type of coworkers, John, where it's like, at face value, they're just like, oh, too lax and seems like they don't do shit or whatever. But when it's time to show and prove, their work ethic really shines, or their results actually are proven, and it's like, wow, this person is a real rock star, or they know what they're doing. And I think that like Beckett is a clear example of that. I mean, I don't know, I'm not 100% clear on like whatever her reasonings are for not wanting to climb as high as she can. I don't know if she just wants to remain low because she wants that kind of free and easy life, and she can get things done easily like in the lower decks. And plus, like, being in the lower decks means like you go on more adventures. Or if she's just afraid of becoming like her parents, specifically her mother, and being that kind of snooty, kind of like, I guess, stiff shirt leadership role. And so I know for myself, as in the field that I work in, I like being more of a worker bee than I do like in a leadership role. I feel I'm more effective in that route. And I think Mariner is like a similar character in that regard.
Yeah, she could also just look at like all the positions above her and just go, wow, it's just like so much more work, and like no one like seems in like any happier or more content with what they're doing. I might as well just stay down here doing what I love.
Exactly, because I mean, there was that episode where like her mother promoted her in order to make her go to more like meetings and leadership like positions, because she felt like that would drive her away. And I can totally understand that. Like when you're in those higher roles, in those higher positions, it's like, yeah, a lot of your time is more spent in meetings and congregations than it is like in the weeds and getting your hands dirty and being adventurous. So like, I can kind of like relate to her character in like her attitude and the way she does things. So I mean, like, I really, at the end of this 10 episode season, like, she is a character that I kind of I relate to. But she is, a very strong and effective and highly intelligent leader, and she has those skill sets. It's just that, and maybe one day that's something that she will get into, but at least where she's at in her life now, she's effective where she's at now. And on the other side of the coin, which was very interesting, and Jason brought this up, is Boimler, in the sense of like, we see him kissing ass and trying to, do whatever it takes to get promoted, because his goal is to like get into that officer leadership role. And as a shocking turn of events at the very end of season 1, we see him get promoted to the what's the name of this? The Titan. Yeah, the Titan with Captain Riker, and leave his friends behind. And that was kind of, I don't want to say it was kind of shocking. It's almost as expected, but I mean, the relationship that we see these characters develop throughout the season, like, you know, it kind of sucks to see it like be cut that soon. However, we are expected and receiving a season 2 very soon on August 12th. So I mean, we'll see what happens from there. But it's like, oh man, like, you know, you confessed and told Mariner that she's your best friend. Or she's your best friend, and you develop this relationship with Tindy, and you know, Rutherford is kind of sad to see the band broken up. However, I do have expectations with the season 2. Like, these paths are going to cross again, whether it's going to be different or we're going to be back to business as usual.
Yeah, I liked the ending. It was caught me off guard because, you know, it's rare that you see like a series kind of like just, you know, aim for like kind of like a wrap up like this. Like, I kind of figured they'd be putting out their stall for like a, hey, renew us for season 2. But this kind of like reads as like they're just kind of expecting, hey, you know, these 10 episodes we're basically going to be like all we're going to get to do here. So let's just kind of like just wrap things up. And it actually feels kind of fitting. You know, it's like I like the idea of, you know, Boimler, like, you know, was stuck to his guns and like, hey, he was gonna, like, we've seen him be like, you know, like just like this very careerist kind of officer, and like when the chance came to jump up, he took it. It's like, you know, it's like, and that's kind of refreshing compared to like all the times when you see like, no, I'm going to stay down here because I like my friends. It's like, no, it's like this feel. Yeah, it's like it's kind of sad to see the band broken up, like you said, Myron. But it's just felt more true to his character and more interesting as well. Especially when you see that that Mariner is just like constantly calling him, saying like, "You dirty double crosser, why'd you go and leave me?"
Yeah,
it's like that felt very true as well. And it's also kind of like an interesting flip side to her situation as well, because even if she is determined to like stay down there in the lower decks, well, that doesn't mean that everyone else is going to stick around with her.
Yeah,
but all that's going to go out the window for season 2, because obviously it's like, you know, they're going to meet up with Boimler again. He's going to do something stupid and get demoted, and suddenly the band's back together. At least that's what I would expect.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, if you think about your own reality, I mean, any job you've had, or, you know, any type of team you've worked with, like, you know, we've all developed like friendships with teammates and team members and things like that, and I love, and a lot of you guys, like, I've are still friends with today, where we kicked it outside of work, and so like we eventually like come back together, but you always have to do what's best for you and your path and your career. So you can't necessarily like hate on Boimler for making this decision, because like you said, Jason, I mean, he wants to be a career officer, and he's just doing what's best for his career and what he wants to do. Whereas Mariner, on the other hand, like, she's very content being in the lower decks, like we've brought up. But like, you know, if you're that disappointed that this person came up before you, or you're disappointed that he left before you, like, maybe, I don't know, you know, consider moving up yourself. I mean, we all grow in different paths and move on, but then, you know, the bonds and the relationship always stay the same. So I kind of like how they added that little touch of reality, where it's like, oh, you asshole, you left Boimler, you can't ignore me. Like, I mean, I've never had that experience, or even friends with that experience. But, you know, when your good friends that you work with on a team end up going and moving on to other things, like, it's sad to see them go, but you want to congratulate them and you know, celebrate in their success, because it only leads to bigger and better things, not necessarily financially, but through experience. And so, like, I like how they kind of add that workplace reality, whereas, like, and I think that's another thing that I like about this show. Like, it adds, like, it's almost like a Workaholics, or like The Office, so to speak, where it's just like these crewmates who are co-workers that actually have a friendship and bond. You know, they each have their individual jobs, but they're, you know, working as an overall team, and have their specialties, but, you know, each one has their own drives and ambitions and what they want to do. Like, you know, Rutherford being, like, you know, a really nerdy engineer and geeking out on, like, you know, like warp cores and just ship parts. Like he's gonna do something big for the fleet someday. And Tendi, you know, wanting to help out people and, you know, become you know, awesome medical officer. She's
And
gonna
creating life.
and creating life. Yeah, she's gonna reach that goal eventually. But Mariner is the only one that is a gray area. Like not that she doesn't want to grow up, but she just doesn't know what she wants to do
Well,
or where she fits in.
She definitely appears to not want the burden of command, but can
Mm-mm.
clearly execute any of those responsibilities with, just, the best of professionalism, but she doesn't
Mhm.
show it unless she needs to.
Right, exactly. Because she likes that freedom of adventure, and like,
Yeah.
you know, I think from the last episode, Riker kind of demonstrates the personality that she would eventually gain if she were to become a captain when she became older. Like Riker seems like that suave adventurer still, but you know, time will only tell if this series continues on that long. But you're right, like she when it's time for her to show and prove, like she shows and prove when it comes to the leadership role. And maybe that's what she's scared of too, to follow the fate of her family, because her father is an admiral and her mom's a captain, and is she destined to be in that leadership role too?
Yeah, what's funny is that you bring up, kind of Mariner being a little bit like Riker. And if you think about it, now there is a convenient thing here about Commander Riker when he was in working, on the Enterprise, and where he's the commander, and like he turns down like 3 or 4 promotions, or 2 or 3 promotions at the very least, to become a captain. And one of those, watching the if there's that one of the more famous cliffhangers in that show is the Best of Both Worlds. It's where they captured Picard and turn him into a Borg. And it was I saw a commentary once that said, well, basically when it says the best of both worlds, it's like he's being offered a command, he turns it down, and Picard's like, oh, you turned down another command. And then he asks Troy, hey, what am I still doing here? We all know that, that's your role in this show, dude.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be the commander,
Mhm.
but he gets forced into command, by the circumstances. And if you look at his character profile that they build, he's got the responsibilities, but he also likes playing around. And if you see that, like, he likes going to bars, he likes dancing, he likes gambling, like all this stuff. Some of the things that you can't do, like when you're a captain, and Picard kind of like embodied that in that show, where it's like I can't show that side of myself. I can't like show this side, and like, so in a lot of way, Mariner's mom's like that. She doesn't show any of that, and she just wants that. That's all she wants. She's like, you know what? I can do the job. I just choose to do it when it's necessary to do the job.
Right, because
So,
you bring up a good point. Because when you're in that role, you got to set the example, and you can't do the things that you love to do, like you said with Riker being in the bars and gambling.
mhm.
Like, you know, like Mariner's still young. I think you made mention to this earlier. Her homegirl that she went to the academy with is already in that leadership role, and you saw the dynamic of their relationship where like she's more serious and take charge, and Mariner's still goofy and like in that college mindset. Yeah, remember when we used to do this and have this stuff? But her friend has kind of moved on from that. And
yeah, and remember, it's like Mariner was like deliberately like slacking off like during that whole encounter. It's like she was just like trying to make her seem like a screw up because she was afraid that her friend was going to like offer her a job on the ship, and like her friend realizes this and calls her out on that, which is a nice touch.
Right.
Like, hey, her friend's not an idiot. She can see what's going on here.
Exactly. And she even calls her out on that too, in the sense of like, you were the one in our whole class who was like, slated to be like, a captain of a ship first. Like, what happened to you? And it's like, she's not ready to necessarily like grow up per se, and I can kind of relate to that too, because it took me a minute to graduate from college, and that's because there were other circumstances pertaining to the curriculum, but at the same time I was on the Van Wilder program where where it was like like I was enjoying my experience in college. I was taking a bunch of different classes that would allow me to bolster my, I guess, my GPA or meet the units in order for me to receive financial aid. But the fact of the matter is that that time I spent there, like I gained more experiences and had a little bit more fun than like doing 4 or 5 years and then jumping into like the adulthood workforce. And so like I guess I can kind of relate to that, but there comes a point and there comes a time where the trigger in your mind just hits and it's like, yeah, I gotta grow up, or yeah, I gotta like, show improve and like start doing what I need to do. And I'm not saying like that's gonna happen to Mariner anytime soon, or otherwise we wouldn't necessarily have like a show. But if this show actually gets like a final season and allowed to end properly, I could foresee that progression or that grow up from Mariner herself. So
Yeah, and I'd say that it's cool that the show can do that. By the way, and it can also be entertaining. Although I kind of felt like, and I like it because I relate to this a lot. I really do. Mariner is a great, you can relate to this character. At least I can. But it's fun. There's a lot of funny moments in this, but there's some dead serious ones in this, especially in this ending here. It's like, okay, well, shit's gone. What's the
Solvang.
The Solvang, like boom, like they're just dead. It's like, what the fuck?
It's like, wait, I thought this was supposed to be the funny show.
Yeah, I was like, wait, where's the funny stuff? And then I think it's got a good balance of, and I still see it as a parody. I still see it as that, but they and I see a lot of the fun that the show can have, but then there's just like this dead serious moment. Like, whoa, all right, cool.
Yeah, and we've
I
already,
like that. I dig it.
And we've already had like a major character death, which I didn't necessarily expect. But you're right.
Hey, did we see a body? Did we see a body?
not necessarily, no. Mm-hmm. And after, and on a side note, going back and watching the Fast and the Furious movies after watching Fast 9, that's in that franchise nobody ever dies. So in this case, I didn't see a body. I just saw the earring, but that could have been the spare earring like he had in his drawer. So you never know. He might surprise us with a revival in season 2.
Yeah, but it was still kind of a thing. It was like that was another one of those moments, right? Like they had like the funeral from him, like he's gone, but are they really ever dead? But I would say that I was like, oh, that's kind of it was like a cool sacrifice though, guys.
I was
just like, oh man, he's just crazy.
Because because did he call Rutherford a pet name when he threw him in the ship, or in the transport?
I think he did. Yeah, it's like I can't remember what it was, but he didn't call say Godspeed Rutherford. It's like Godspeed something. I think.
Yeah, I thought he said something like Baby Bear or something like that.
Yeah,
And I was going to ask you guys, like, did I hear that correctly? But I just kind of let it pass. But that just kind of tells me, like, I mean, those two kind of had like a little like friendship relationship earlier on in the season 2, and so like I now that I say that I kind of agree with you guys. Like, who's to say he wasn't like warped or anything like that?
He's just floating in the void, holding his breath, waiting for someone to pick him up, because that's how he rolls.
Well, it was interesting how they're like, yeah, he's well, he's with the prophets now because he's Bajoran, everyone. That's what the earring is all about. And the Bajorans were really highlighted in that Deep Space Nine show.
I see.
But he's like, he's probably with the prophets, like exploding like a warp core or something. I'm like, it's like, but yeah, you're right. He kind of like, when it came to Rutherford, he worked with him for a little bit, and he was like ready to bring him on his team, and he's like, yeah, what was that? The Smorgasbord simulation.
Yeah.
Worth. So. But still sad though. I mean, I was like, oh man, that's kind of sad. But overall, I really enjoyed this show. And I'm gonna say this season, everything, the ending, these last 2 episodes for me were like some of the top. I mean, it's hard to judge. There's so many of these that I just thought were really good. I think this series is good, and I'm actually looking forward to the next season. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are, guys.
I can see myself making time for this now, especially since my parents have a Paramount Plus subscription. I can just leech off that.
Yeah, and at this point, like I'm kind of waiting for season 2 to come out on Blu-ray, but at the same time, and I'm gonna sidetrack and side note on here on this topic, but Paramount Plus, I just feel like they got some good stuff, but I feel like they need more in order for me to add that to my subscription plate. Because I mean, everybody has their own service. Everybody has their own app and everything like that now too. However, like I'm a big fan of like Nickelodeon animation, and that's a strong like brand to have in order to entice me to go over. And I've enjoyed this season so much. That's another enticement in the sense of like, yeah, I don't want to wait till like season 2 is done. I kind of want to jump in this now. So I'm kind of teetered on the fence whether I should jump on this right away, because I already subscribe to like HBO Max and Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus, which those 4 are my main. But then like I got Crunchyroll and Shudder and Amazon Prime. That's more for the shipping. Like I already subscribe to a lot of these other services. However, Paramount Plus, some of them are at a competitive price point. Like I think Paramount starts at like maybe $6.99, $7.99. It's not that expensive to where like I'm highly considering it, especially after like finishing this season. Like I really want to jump into season 2 and kind of keep up. And then of course there's some other properties on the Nickelodeon front that I really want to go back and watch that back catalog. So I'm just kind of waiting to see like what Paramount Plus also has more to offer before I jump in. But yeah. I like when it comes to the Star Trek brand, like I feel this is a strong entry for them. And like and I've mentioned this several times before, like I'm not as deep into the franchise as you guys are, but I mean they have Picard and they have what's the other one?
Discovery.
Thank you. Discovery and Lower Decks. So they have new projects for the Star Trek brand. And when we had this conversation a little earlier before we started recording about like the movies, like, yeah, I haven't seen 6. Like I haven't seen let's see, I saw Generations when it came out in theaters back in the day. Don't remember it. I remember First Contact, and we were talking about Nemesis, and I vaguely remember that because that was like the last like Star Trek movie I saw in the theaters pertaining to like the old cast before J.J. Abrams took over. And so like if Paramount Plus has those movies in their entire like the entire movie library in their pocket, that might be another enticement right there, because I do want to see those movies again, and I don't know if they're on any other platform. So, that might be a way for me to jump into season 2 right away, especially like, got another like, 3 weeks before season 2 premieres before I can make that decision. Yeah. So I might cancel something and jump in.
I'll tell you, it's a strong draw. Just
It is.
Lower Decks itself is a pretty strong draw for me. I mean, I have watched. I'm not really impressed with the other two series that you just
Mhm.
mentioned. Discovery, I've given it a chance, and also
Picard.
Picard. And I know people like it, and more power to you. You know, if you like that. I'm not really into it, but man, Lower Decks really reeled me in. So, I mean, it's a strong draw for me to want to subscribe to the service. I will tell you one thing. I'll definitely be getting the second season on Blu-ray. I just see it. It's really good. Oh, by the way, there is another series that is coming out yet again, and that's another. It could be a potential draw for me if I like this. If I like what I see, and that'll be. It's called Strange New Worlds, where they're going to be. It's going to be Captain Pike, who is the captain that comes before Kirk,
Oh wow. Okay.
commanding the Enterprise, and it's going to be the same one that you've seen in Discovery, essentially. So that could be a draw for me, and quite honestly, I can't tell because I'd have to actually sit and watch it and see. Plus, the other draw about that show is that they're returning to episodic, like single episode or two-parter episode, like storytelling.
Non-serialized storytelling.
Yeah, non-serialized storytelling. That also appeals to me because to me that's a lot of like what Star Trek kind of is, like Lower Decks actually kind of is more Star Trek than like Picard and Discovery in a lot of ways, because those are kind of like whole season arcs, and I'm like, okay, even Deep Space Nine kind of had like a loose kind of arc, but they still, it was like events that were happening around them. I could really get into that though. I could really get into the, like I said, this um Lower Decks certainly did that, and I appreciate that. By the way, I'm like, okay, it's got some loose connections, like the captain of the Rubidoux, then coming on to being the captain of the Solvang, and then dying violently, a violent death. Oops.
Yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, I want to see what happens with this cast of characters, and I have a suspicion that we're going to see Boimler coming back. So,
And see something you both just mentioned about serialized and story arcs, like there was a time where like, and correct me if I'm wrong, chime in if I'm wrong, but because I never really watched like the original Star Trek series like super hardcore, but each episode seen like its own contained story, but there was like an overarching story, so to speak. But you didn't need to watch like the entire season in order to like get the full picture, so to speak. And I think a lot of TV shows were like that during our era, where like, yeah, you could like, watch whatever episode and not necessarily like miss a single story piece. You just kind of you'll get the overall picture of what the series is about and kind of like the generalized story. But in this day and age, like with binging and shit, like we have to like, you can't miss an episode. Like you can't miss like an arc, like especially like in a deep series, like I don't know, like a Battlestar Galactica. Like with each season, it's like there were different struggle, or with each episode there were different struggles to like deal with. But if you miss like a certain segment, you might miss a piece of information, from a vital piece of information from season 1 that ends up pertaining to something in season 4, so on and so forth. And a lot of shows are like that now, to where like it requires a lot of investment on our attention, and it's not necessarily like now that we're older, we're adults, like we might not necessarily really have the time for that. And I think maybe that's why like a lot of like television show formats, especially on streaming services, are shorter, because during our day, you had like a 25 episode season. Now seasons average between 6 to maybe 10 episodes on a streaming platform, so that way there's like less time to invest and you get the overall story. But we've come into this culture of binging to where like, oh, on a weekend I blasted this season, and it's like, oh man, like when's the next season? Like, I've been waiting like 3 years for Stranger Things season 4, and so like, I do kind of like that formula where like, yeah, as we were watching Lower Decks, as you said, like it kind of keeps to that, serialized formula where I can just watch an episode and get the gist of the story, but I don't necessarily have to watch the entire season to get like the full blown picture,
Yeah, well, it's not just like seasons on streaming services are shorter. I mean, this is true for like basic cable, like regular cable.
Really?
Yeah, it's like most stuff is like only like 10 or 13 episodes like for a season these days. It's like, I mean,
damn.
I think that like the major networks still will order like 20 or 22 episodes like a drama or a sitcom, but a lot of stuff, it's not just the streaming services. I think the networks are realizing that it's like we can control the quality better if there are fewer episodes to manage. So
and see that makes sense. And to your point too, like I think the last shows on like network television I was into was like the Goldbergs, Blackish, Modern Family, like those sitcoms, and those kind of ranged into like the 20, even the Simpsons too, like they range in like the 20 something episodes per season. But with streaming, like I don't even necessarily like watch them on live television anymore. I just wait for them to post up on like the app so I can just like binge it. But I haven't watched live network television in a long time to know what like the formats are anymore. So that's interesting that you brought that up, Jason, because you're right. There's just like there's so much content out there now. Like you got to find a way to like keep people's attention. And it's like if there's like 8 shows that I'm into right now, and they're each like 22 to 25 episodes a piece, like I can't invest all that time as much as I want to or I would. I finally like finished binging the series of Big Bang Theory, and that's thanks to HBO Max. And there was a point where I was watching that when it came on Thursdays, I think I was watching that every week, on CBS, and there came a point where like I couldn't keep up. So that's interesting that you bring up that fact.
So I reiterate this just because my friends, people who know me, because I've stated this opinion before. So you have something like that is a serialized kind of a storytelling. It's almost like when you binge watch a show like that, it's like you're watching a movie, right? Like it's just in segments and chunks, right?
Mhm.
While I don't mind that type of storytelling in a television show, I actually prefer smaller. Like I am a fan of the short story with a similar framing device. I'm a real fan of that, and some of the Star Trek definitely has that, and there's some other shows that have that and don't do it well. But I like that. I kind of like, like the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone is an anthology series where it's like every episode just has its own thing, and I'm like, I like anthologies.
I like that too.
And I don't think of, and Star Trek in a lot of ways to me was like, it's like a anthology with a similar framing device. I mean, it's like, but they are, you have the same characters, the same things. It's just kind of, they just kind of move things through. And they're their own self-contained stories. I enjoyed that. I really do. So because I like watching the end of a show and knowing that the story is complete, instead of like, okay, well, what the hell's going to happen? And don't get me wrong, Battlestar Galactica, the Ron Moore, I love that show. I really do. And, and I think that, well done, it can be executed well, as long as you have a good conclusion.
Right.
And there have been some complaints about some of these shows, there's at least 2 I can think of off the top of my head that had fairly weak conclusions being a serialized series.
Game of Thrones.
That's a problem. That could be a problem. It's like, and then you hear rage on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's like, oh, okay, well, So to me, and that's why I when we talk about Battlestar Galactica, like the Ron Moore series that happened in 2000s, I'm glad it had a conclusion. I'm glad that everything was kind of wrapped up. That's a good series for me. Anything like that, would be good. However, again, when it comes to Star Trek, more on the short story side. So it's like, what the hell's going on here? Let's piece it together. And yeah, sometimes those stories do fall flat. Some stories aren't as strong, but then some other ones I'm like, whoa, that's cool. So
and let's face it, like, some of the best shows or some of the shows that we think are the best, end up getting canceled. Like, there was a show on Netflix I watched recently called The Irregulars, which was like a spin on Sherlock Holmes. It only got a 1-season treatment, and then it got canceled. I don't think it drew in the numbers that they were expecting, but I thought it was a pretty good show. But at the same time, it's like, you just never know, like, how your show is going to take off, or how the stories are going to be able to be fleshed out in a season, and if you're even going to get a second season to finish telling it. So, like, leaves the audience hanging. So I think serialized versus non-serialized is, like, an interesting topic to kind of discuss in the Star Trek conversation, because, like, like, to Jason's point earlier, like, if this doesn't get a second season, or if this didn't get a second season, then at least I could say this was satisfying, like, in the sense of, like, okay, Boimler moved on here, Mariner's pissed off and she remained, and Tendi and Rutherford are, they're happily doing what they're doing on a ship. And it's kind of like satisfying in the sense of, like, okay, the this is the end of this adventure of these four friends. But there's more because of its popularity, that we're getting some more, and I'm hoping that the execs, or the higher powers that be at Paramount, realize, like, okay, this is a popular show, let's renew for maybe a 3-season total, and hey guys, that's your chance to either tell everything, or like, if it becomes popular, if it's still remaining popular within season 3, we might extend. And so, like
do the Rick and Morty thing. We're going to renew you for like 70 more episodes, so you can do, like, you've got like some, like a wide space in which to, like, to tell your story.
Exactly. I mean, like, you kind of, I mean, I'm not a television exec. I'm not in that business, but you can kind of tell when a show blows up, or if it's kind of lame to where, like, it sucks and it's not going to make it. But with Rick and Morty, it was like, from the jump, it's like, oh man, this is interesting. And then by season 2, it's like, oh dude, like, this shit is, this is it. Like, this is one of those cartoons. And to John's, like, to a previous conversation John and I had not too long ago about whatchamacallit, Teen Titans. I was hating on that show because I felt it got Young Justice canceled. Like, yeah, Young Justice, like, we had 2 seasons and it's not hitting that market, we're going to cancel it. And they left it on a cliffhanger. Then they give us Teen Titans Go, and I'm like, man, what is this bullshit? But it ended up being fun, and I loved it, and it lasted longer than what I expected. And that's, you just never know, like, what is gonna, well, your audience, and you just never know what's gonna take off or appeal. But then again, that goes to other variables, like when you're airing on television, like time slots and days and things like that. Because eventually Young Justice got renewed once DC launched their own streaming services, and now they got a season 4 coming out. And so, like, you just never know how the show's going to take off. It's just that, depending on, what story you're going to tell, you got to frame it and tell it in a way to where, like, if it's going to take off, like, yeah, you can kind of get it across in so many seasons. But if it doesn't, then, like, hey, just like this first season, end it off in a nice cap, but then kind of leave it open to where, like, you could tell more adventures, but then like if it gets canceled, then at least it kind of had like a good, nice ending. Yeah, it had a good run. And so like I understand that's kind of hard to do, and especially if it's going to be like a long serialized kind of storyline. But if you frame it where it's kind of like, its own contained, adventure, but then, it does have this, it does have this overall like encompassing story, but not necessarily like in a serialized to where like, oh, tuned in next time because you don't want to miss this. Like it doesn't leave us hanging and like wanting more and feeling disappointed if things don't go the way the producers and the studios want it to go. Yeah. And so on a quick note, I want to say like Fringe is a pretty decent example in the sense of like that's another J.J. Abrams show. I love Fringe, and I remember I think after season 3, there was always talks like, yeah, they're talking about canceling Fringe. They're talking about canceling Fringe, but then like we got a season 4, and they're like, yeah, they're talking about canceling Fringe. And so like I think by season 5, it felt like J.J. Abrams was like, I got to wrap this up because like if I don't wrap it up now, God knows if I'm going to get a season 6. And so like he wrapped it up. However, I don't feel like I was satisfied with the wrap up, but at the same time, I was kind of dissatisfied because it was shorter and I felt like he wanted more to tell, but didn't necessarily get a chance to tell it. And so I think that's kind of that example where like, yeah, when Fringe first came out, it was a hit. Definitely like the first 2 seasons, but then maybe it started wearing thin and numbers started dropping, but it had its fan base. And so like, that's the dangers when you're like creating, like to your point earlier, John, creating that kind of serialized series and some of them end really crappy. Like I love Game of Thrones, really love Game of Thrones, but I'm in the camp like everybody else. Like, yeah, dude, like that shit was like, it could have been better. It felt rushed. Like, but overall, I love the series. And that's what's kind of like, that's what's kind of disheartening about like serialized shows like that. I mean, you just never know if you're going to get that complete experience where, Rotten Tomatoes gives it a positive score and everybody's completely satisfied, or you're going to be completely let down and everybody's in this divisive conversation for years to come. Like, oh, I loved season 8 of Game of Thrones. Like, oh man, that shit sucked. So
it's funny, Jason. I feel like we've had this conversation before when it comes to certain anime series too.
Yep. It's like the thing about anime series is that they tend to either just last 13 to 26 episodes or else they go on forever.
Yes.
Like One Piece.
One Piece is never gonna end. So
yep. Exactly. So yeah, but that's a conversation we should have for a totally different cast.
Oh yeah,
we could go on about equal amount of time with that one because but there are some different dynamics, I think, when it comes to anime and stuff like that.
Yeah, so. Especially when you have to like deliver a cliffhanger ending, like it's like, hey, your manga is still ongoing, so we've got to leave the door open, or if you're just going to try and wrap things up and go for an original ending, which has its own problems as well.
Yeah, but in a nutshell, with this show, like I'm glad that I was able to watch it from episode 1 through 10, and we did get this overall like overarching connection between like the characters and what being in the lower decks is about, and like Mariner's relationship with her mom and things like that. But you could have easily shown it to me like out of order, and I wouldn't have never known. Like each one was, self-contained and very entertaining. The only episodes, and I think that's why I said earlier why this season finished off strong. I felt like, episodes 9 and 10 were the only kind of like, kind of connector episodes, and that was more so because of like the secret being exposed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of good jokes for Star Trek fans. And if you're not even a hardcore Star Trek fan, still entertaining, you know? But yeah, a highly recommended series by me. I mean, like, and by the way, pleasantly surprising in terms of entertainment value for me. So that's my final on this season. So I don't know what you guys had on. Well, obviously it sounds like pretty much the same. But you know, coming from a long line of Star Trek fans, yeah, that's my opinion of it, and I think I look forward to the next season.
Yep, you and me both.
Yep.
I do too.
All right. Hey, thanks guys for joining, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Enjoy your Saturday, kiddies.
Yep,
Yep.
laters.
Don't forget the cereal with the milk.